dickheads? I'm back. You guys are probably getting sick of the nights. My bad. Show's almost over, guys. I promise. I just got a couple more nights. I'm even debating if this is the last night before I just do the last couple episodes and then call her quits. Doesn't matter. I will continue doing the nights even afterwards. Maybe I'll even change the name of the podcast feed or move it over to its own feed. But for now, we're doing our Private Dick side quests. Today, we're going to do a famous night. I'm talking about Sir Percival. Now, I know even if you know nothing about King Arthur's knights, minus what you like grow up with, I'm sure you've heard of Percival. Percival was the first knight to go on the quest for the Holy Grail. He actually achieves the Grail in some stories, but not in the Studilian cycle. Well, I guess he does in the Studilian cycle, just he's not the only one. But before we get into that story of the, let's say, pure-souled Percival, as you'll see very soon, the naive, let's say, Sir Percival, we have to talk about the lie from the previous episode. And what's the lie, you ask? Well, I do have to give this disclaimer before every episode for a new listener. If this is your first episode of my Knights of the Round Table series, you should go back and listen to the first one, which was Private Dick's proper episode number 59 and 60 about King Arthur. And then I just decided I wanted to do an episode on every night. So it'll be called PD Side Quests. You can go one through whatever. I think this would be episode 22. There'd be 22 of them. So there's a lot of homework if you want to catch right up. And I'm not saying you absolutely need to catch right up. It's just like it'll be more fun for you because this lie stuff will make more sense. But if you listen to them all over the place too, I kind of like that. That's kind of fun. What I'm doing here is I'm researching a night for a week, telling you what I know, what I found out, and then adding a little spice of my own. And that's the lie, the spice. So it's basically a story that's not part of the legend yet. I do this in hopes that it does become part of the legend, as in someone hears it, doesn't realize I made this shit up, adds it to their podcast, and then their podcast is listened to somebody who's writing an article about Sir whomever, and it gets added there, and then somebody else, and then somebody else, and then eventually the Studilian cycle of the Arthurian legend becomes part of the lore, and that would be so fucking funny to me. It's all of this is all made up by somebody else too. Why can't I make up some of it? You know what I mean? Like I'm just adding to what some other fucking fan fiction writer wrote 1,000 years ago. Last episode we covered Sir Ector de Maris, half brother of Lancelot and someone who tried for the Grail. The lie I told you last episode was more of an embellishment. It was an embellishment on the fight between Ector and Turquine. Ector and Turquine did fight, that's true. Ector did lose, that's true. He got stuffed in a dungeon. That's also true. But that's the whole story. That's all they give you. The whole fight where Ector swings 3 times and knocked out without his head ever being hit. Yeah, that's bullshit. That's all me. I like it. Like I said, is it really a lie if everything ended the same? It just makes kind of the story better. It's like a white lie. The more I think about the Studilian cycle thing, it just might end up being my legacy to the world. You could say you were here first. Let's dive into today's knight. He was raised in the forest and turns into one of the OG Knights of the Round, famous for at least seeing the Grail before anyone else and his presence in many old Arthurian tales. Let's talk about the naive one, the innocent one, the pure one, Sir Percival.
An elite team of private detectives.
What if balloons are aliens? Maybe that's the key component we're missing.
Cover-ups.
John's guilty.
Mysteries that need to be solved.
Maybe Mormons need mountains.
Richard, shut up.
Sir Percival's epithet is literally the innocent. But he could have also been called Sir Percival the Idiot, because he's also kind of an idiot. Sir Percival, in earlier versions of Arthurian legend, is the original Grail Knight. But in later Arthurian legend, most of Percival's Grail stories are actually changed into Galahad stories. And Galahad's who we're going to do next week if I don't just do the whole Grail stuff next time. In the Studilian cycle of the Arthurian legend, Percival is the first knight to see the Grail, but Galahad is the first to achieve it. So we're just going to set a line right there just to make this stuff easy. Before we go too far into this tale, let's start from the start. Let's start with his early years. For the Studilian cycle of the Arthurian tales, Sir Percival, but in some of the lore, he's just a civilian who ends up in the royal court. Most of the stories won't make sense if he's not like a king's son, in my opinion. So he has to be a king's son. So he's royalty. His father was King Pellinor. Pellinor will be covered a lot in the Grail episode because he's a major player in that whole thing, so I'm not going to say much about him, but I will tell you that Pellinor was called the King of the Isles, so he was probably King of Wales and the surrounding area. He was also from the famous bloodline, that of Joseph Arimathea, the guy who collected Christ's blood in the Last Supper cup. That Last Supper cup is basically what the Grail is, or what the Studalian cycle of the Grail legend will say, mostly. So the family, Joseph of Arimathea, his family is forever intertwined with the Grail because of him collecting that blood. Pellinor is said to have 12 sons and 2 daughters, both legitimate and illegitimate. For this story, we're only going to talk about Percival, one of his sisters, and a couple of his brothers briefly. But I will tell you that Pellinor knocked out some killer roundtable knights. Percival has a few famous knight brothers like Sir Aglavale, Lamorak, Dornar, and Tor, whom we already talked about before, because I like the name Tor, Sir Tor. They have a few sisters, one named Dindrain. Dindrain ends up being important in the Grail episode, so we'll talk about her later too. He also has 2 unnamed brothers, whom I will talk about in a second. That's the 2 knights I said I'll briefly mention. So, at some point in Percival's early life, his father, Pellinor, was shunned from the land by a rival king named King Lot. We spoke about him before in the King Arthur episode. Pellinor wasn't killed by King Lot by any means, but he was exiled from the land. And he was injured by a holy spear in his crotch area, and it was known afterwards as the Maimed King rather than the King of the Isles, which they say in his like crotch area. Like I don't know if that hit his dick. I don't know. I literally don't know if he got speared his cock off, but sure, let's say that's what happened. So Pellinor is gone, exiled from the land, and this left his wife by herself. So instead of staying in the castle with her children, which I'm sure she was kicked out, she really probably had nowhere else to stay. She runs off to the woods under a mountain to escape the complicated city life. Probably from being executed, is what that means. His mother, unnamed mother, another unnamed woman in this episode, and she's a pretty big part of the episode, which I find of the times. Her name is Sally. Sally, his mother Sally, brought Percival and his sister Dindrain into the woods to bring them up in the wild. The rest of her kids were either grown and gone or whatever. We'll talk a little bit about that. His mother didn't want either of them to grow up knowing the ways of men, keeping them away from knightly things like war and fighting. His mother wanted to raise them in their under the mountain house in the woods because she had lost her older kids to being knights before Percival, and she wanted to keep him home and safe. One of her sons, not sure the name, was sent to King Ban to squire at his castle, and another was sent to King Esclavon to squire there. Both of them died in various wars fighting for their new kings. This devastated their mother, hence the reason she had away Percival. Percival lived the wild child life. He had little structure, and when it came to the ways of chivalry, knightlyhood, his mother didn't teach him anything, but she did teach him some stuff. She taught him about church, she taught him about God, which in their time that was good for him to learn. And she always used to warn Percival about the dangers of devils and how they could be everywhere. And if you saw one, you would know because they were the ugliest beings in existence. But on the other hand, she said angels were beautiful, the most beautiful things in existence. So you'd know an angel if you saw it as well. Percival was a good horseman. He learned on his own. He was also a great hunter, something else he learned on his own. He was known to be an ace of a shot with his 3 javelins. And he was quite happy out there when he thought about his life. And that changed at about the age of 15. Percy's out hunting and hears the clinking and clanking of armor walking through the woods near his hunting spot. Percival had never heard the clanking of armor, so he automatically thought that this must be devils coming to get him. So he snuck closer, javelins in hand, ready to attack. Who or what is walking in the woods? Devils need to be snuck up on. So if it's a devil, I better sneak up. Then as he goes through a little bit of brush, he sees 5 knights walking side by side, talking with each other as they went. When Percival saw the knight's armor glimmering in the sun, he changed his mind on a sneak attack. The shimmering in the sun made him think that they must be angels. So he approached the angels and asked them who they were. They said they were knights, knighted by King Arthur himself. And then Percy's all like, cool, I think. I don't really think he even knows who King Arthur is, which is fun. Then he starts with the knight's armor. What's that? It's armor. Wow, super cool. What's that? That's my lance. Sick. What's that? Oh, this? This is my shield. Wow, man, you're like the best. Did you get all that stuff from King Art too? Yes, not 5 years ago. We were going to see him right now. I must go with you. Percival brings the five knights to his house. Give me a second, guys. Just got to grab my stuff. The knights go wandering around a bit, around Percival's house a little bit, and Percival goes in to see his mother. Percival loved talking to these guys. Just that little trip. These five knights were what inspired him to want to be like them. And it was something like a pull he couldn't control. It was like a destiny, maybe. So he now knew what he wanted to be for the rest of his life, which was a knight, which is the very thing his mother was trying to protect him from, which is also kind of ironic. So he rushes into the house, tells his mother about the knights and his intentions to leave with them and to be like them. He told her about how he saw five shining knights that looked like angels, and she told him that he would recognize an angel if he saw him, so these must be angels. So his mother reluctantly agrees and says that he can leave. And I'm pretty sure even if she wanted to stop him, she couldn't. He was kind of crazy with that lance, or the javelins. She was, of course, sad that he was leaving, but she also teaches him stuff about the outside world while he's packing up his shit. I think she realized how sheltered he lived, like what kind of a sheltered life he lived, and he would have to now learn a lot of stuff really quickly, especially if he's going to go meet a king. He should probably know a few things, you know? So first she tells him about his lineage, how he was highborn, how his brothers died, things that he probably should have known already. She gives him a couple pieces of advice. One of the pieces of advice is that if he needed to pray, that he should do it in a cathedral, chapel, or church. Percival doesn't realize it till later, but he doesn't even know what those are. Talk about that in a bit. She also tells him how to swoon a woman, a lady. She tells Percival he needs to always honor a woman, and it would be okay to take a freely offered kiss, ring, or alms purse from a maiden, but nothing more. She told Percival that he would have to win the love of ladies first before he could get any of that stuff. And also, sorry, I had to look up what an alms purse was, but it's just that little satchel you see on medieval people where they keep their coins and shit, like an old timey fanny pack. So I find that weird that she just give him the fucking, I don't know, guess a little bit of money. I do love the thought of these knights just standing around waiting for a 15-year-old kid to say bye to his mom, and she's like giving him all this worldly advice, and it's probably taking hours. They must have been so annoyed. He finally gets out of the hut and trots off with the knights, javelins in hand, ready to become a great knight. And as they leave, the mother stands on the road watching her son leave. And when he was almost out of eyesight, the mother was weeping and fell to her knees in grief. So it's kind of sad. That night, Percival wants to pray and go to sleep, but he remembers his mother saying that he can only pray in a church, so he goes out looking for one. Not knowing what a church was, he finds a tent out in the woods with a beautiful woman sleeping inside. This must be a church. All the things a 15-year-old boy loves: camping and hot chicks. It's late at night, damsel sleeping peacefully. Percival doesn't really know what he's doing, kind of wanders in, and then he sees the woman sleeping there, and he remembers what his mom told him. You could freely get some kisses. So as she sleeps there, he goes in and takes a kiss. 7, in fact. Multiple pecks. Just kept kissing her, one after the other. The only thing that stopped him from kissing was the fact that he saw a beautiful emerald ring on her finger. Then Percival steals the ring right off her hand. So, good start, Percival. Unconsensual kisses and robbery. They call this guy the innocent, but like not in like a way that like he's so pure, you know what I mean? He's more called innocent in the way that I say someone's like touched by God, if you know what I mean. It's look at Jimmy the innocent working the door at Walmart. You know, after he gets his ring, he starts to refresh himself with the wine in her tent and starts to eat her venison. He takes 3 patties. The whole time, he's sitting there like, You gonna have some of this? You want some of this? He's like offering her food and wine. She's all confused and upset, and she refuses to eat with him. Percival says, "Okay, you do you, man," and then he leaves. Minutes after Percival leaves, the damsel's husband returns. This guy doesn't have a real name, but he's known as the Haughty Knight of the Heath. And the Haughty Knight's no doubtedly pissed when he comes in, sees his wife being was just kissing another man. Half his food's gone, a bottle of wine's out the door. So he's pissed. The wife tries to explain. He doesn't believe her. He says that there's no way this was not consensual. His jealousy got the best of him. So the haughty knight vows to go on a quest to get revenge on the knight who violated his wife and stole his food. He also kind of gives the wife a punishment too, like shuns her, says, "Yeah, right, I don't believe you." So she's kind of fucked. Haughty knight's after Percival. Percival doesn't know, none the wiser. Still with the five knights. Gets back with the guys. They finally get to Camelot. And as they get to Camelot, there's a party going on. Percival, as they're walking through the crowd of people, keeps asking his new friends to meet King Arthur so he can demand a knighthood. And like I said earlier, Percival wasn't trained at one of these schools like most of the other knights. He didn't have like chivalry or like he never went to chivalry class. He never like learned manners. He didn't have sword training, like proper sword training. Percival learned what he could in the woods as a kid by himself. So to him, it wasn't rude to go tell a king how good he was and why he should keep him around. So they get into court and everyone's drinking and being merry. And the Red Knight of Quincoroy seizes the moment and uses it to steal the king's golden cup and ride off before anyone knows he did it. So he runs past the king on his horse, snatches the golden cup, spilling wine onto the queen's lap, Queen Guinevere. And it happens so quickly that no one has time to react, and the Red Knight easily gets away. And I think most people were scared of the Red Knight and they didn't want to pursue, even for their beloved king and queen. But maybe I could be wrong. And just after this cup gets stolen, the queen's full of wine on her lap, Percival walks up and introduces himself to King Arthur. Percival demands to be knighted. And the king's in awe. He doesn't really even know what to say, kind of chuckles and says, "Oh, is that all?" And Percival replies, "Nah, that's not it. I want that guy's red armor too." So Arthur belly laughs this time. And some maiden from the background is all like, "That's going to be the greatest night ever." And she continues to laugh, which is said to be significant because she hadn't laughed for 6 years prior, which I find also great that they mention that as like this lady even laughed and she doesn't laugh. Last time she laughed, King Arthur fell down a bunch of stairs or like very dark sense of humor. Anyways, I do like that they made. And then Sir Kay hears the maiden say this, and he literally slaps her in the face because of how dumb he thinks she is. This guy's not going to be the greatest knight. Then, out of further frustration, Kay kicks Arthur's court jester, who's just there. Just kicks him. The jester is pissed and mumbles to himself that Kay will receive his comeuppance for kicking him. I promise that. The Red Knight will one day break his arm and shoulder blade because of this, as retribution for you being a dick. Kay doesn't even acknowledge the jester and turns to the young man Percival, who's still sitting there waiting for Arthur's reply. Sir Kay butts in and tells Percival that the Red Knight's armor belongs to the Red Knight, and that if you want it, you'll have to go take it from him. And this is Kay kind of being a dick, but Percival doesn't understand his cruel joke. The boy takes it as a challenge and rides out to get the knight's armor. So Percival catches up pretty quickly, stops the Red Knight, and asks him for his armor. "Give me your armor by order of Sir Kay and the king." Percival is dismounted to go get his new armor. The Red Knight's pissed, downs his lance, and charges at Percival. Percival is unarmored. All he had for a weapon was his javelins, which he was very proficient with. So Percival picks up a javelin and threw it right at the guy's head, kills him instantly, hitting him right in the eye. Percival goes, "Nice." Percival starts to try and take the armor off the dead knight, but didn't know what the hell he was doing. He gets the helmet off pretty easy and plunks that right on. Red Knight's brain not even wiped off yet. One of the squires from Arthur's court sees the scuffle. His name's Yvonne, and he comes out to help Percival. He's like, "Dude, that's really not how you take armor off of someone. This is how you do it." and Yvonne teaches young Percival how to take someone's armor off. Then Percy proceeds to take the armor off the dead man's body and put it on himself. As soon as the armor is on, Percival's confidence was at an all-time high. Percival now considers himself a knight, whether he's knighted or not. Percival then vows in his mind to get revenge on the knight who slapped the lady and kicked the jester. That guy was a dick. That knight was Sir Kay, so basically Arthur's brother, but what does Percy know? He grabs the king's missing gold cup, rides back to court, new armor and new confidence. He dismounts, brings the cup right to Arthur, and basically says, "So, am I a knight now?" Arthur knights him at that ceremony that night, almost right away. Arthur was impressed by his raw talent and pure heart. So, now that he's a knight, he wants to go back home and show his mom that he's doing well and to see if she is also doing well. He had a lot of anxiety about how he left her. So he and his red armor, his old horse, head back on the road. Problem was, Percival didn't know the way back. So on the road, Percival runs into a mysterious castle. Percy is a knight now. It is his duty to investigate. It ends up being the castle of Gornemond of Gohort, where he's greeted by Lord Gornemond. Gornemond was always a chivalrous knight. He offers Percival to stay the night while at the castle. Gornemond also offers to teach the boy chivalric ways and courtly manners. Also, give him a rundown on weapons, the weapons the knight uses, give him some training on how to use the weapons, and how to keep them in good order. And finally, he wants to offer the boy some advice. The piece of advice is this: when visiting other people's houses, do not talk too much or ask too many questions of its hosts. Which I find that hilarious. This guy was probably getting pissed right off by Percival, just being annoyed by the confidence of the young man. Probably realized that the kid was a bit rude, honestly, and shutting the fuck up helps you not be rude. So if you're gonna be a knight, you're gonna need to learn this stuff, like how to shut the fuck up sometimes. The story makes it sound like Percival learns all this stuff in a day, which probably could learn like say please, say thank you, don't talk. All that stuff could probably be learned in a day. Because it says the next day he was off again to try and find his mother. He still doesn't know where he's going and runs into another castle, Castle Beaurepaire, the castle of Gourmand's niece, Blanchefleur. Castle Beaurepaire was under siege at the time of his arrival. A guy named Clamado of the Isles was trying to steal her land and force Blanchefleur to marry him. Unfortunately, by the time Percival arrives, most of Blanchefleur's men were already captives of Clamado. Percival, seeing no other way out, offers to help the lady, and Blanchefleur offers her love and her lands in return. Percival likes this deal and decides that he will challenge Clamdo to single combat. Clamdo accepts and chooses his greatest warrior, Engaigeron, to fight in his behalf. Percival easily wins this duel with a swift javelin throw right to the heart, killing the champion instantly. Now that single combat's over, Percival is the winner, but he spares the invader's life. The deal was that Percival wouldn't kill Clamado under two conditions. First, he returned to Camelot as Arthur's prisoner, and second, to deliver a message. Clamdo accepts the punishment and brings the message back to Arthur's court. The message was to tell the Laughing Maiden, the one that Sir Kay slapped, that Percival will be back soon enough to avenge her. He leaves, and Percival is now the lord of Blanchefleur's land. Married, he's the king, or I guess like the lord. The pair of them get married and have a son named Lohengrin, which I guess that means he stays there for at least a year, or close to it anyway. Sir Lohengrin, I won't get into much, but I will tell you that later in life he is known as the Knight of the Swan, and he's the inspiration for Richard Wagner's famous opera, aptly named Lohengrin. Percival still has guilt about his mother. Unfortunately, Percival cannot stay to look over his lands, and his mission was to get back and see his mother. So Percival swore to his wife and son that he'd be back to bring his mother back just as soon as he could find her. And on his search for his childhood home, Percival comes upon a crippled man fishing in a river. Percival, being the chivalrous knight, or trying to be the chivalrous knight that he is, offers to help the man. The man told Percival that he was the lord of a nearby castle, and if Percival can get him back, he would let him stay there for the night. This guy's name in Arthurian legend is the Fisher King, and the castle they're going to was Castle Corbenic. As soon as Percival and the Fisher King get back to the castle, as a show of his gratitude, the Fisher King gifts a mighty sword to Percival. This sword is another one, like another named one, called Trebuchet sword. Now, the Fisher King was injured years ago. He got injured with a spear around the crotch. Kind of like Pelennor. Weird, not super relevant, but still interesting that these guys are getting their cock speared off by spears. The Fisher King couldn't sit it without it hurting. He couldn't stand without it hurting. He couldn't sit on a horse without it hurting. He couldn't lead his men into battle without it hurting. The only thing he could enjoy was fishing on a small boat in the river near his home. So Castle Corbenic and his kingdom are tied to the Fisher King. The kingdom was a reflection of his health. Barren, decaying, sad, and sullen. This is very powerful magic. Within Castle Corbenic, during the night, Percival witnesses a weird procession of what seemed like nonsense. The first thing that passed him in the procession was a squire holding a bleeding spear. Squire walks right past him, paying him no mind. I don't know if this means the spear is actually bleeding or if it's just a spear full of blood, but regardless, Percival sat there with many questions, but he didn't ask because he was told not to talk too much by Lord Gourmand. The next two squires passed by, both holding candelabras. Many questions, kept his mouth shut like a good knight. The last person in the procession was a lady walking with a grail. Some of the stories say that the lady's holding a grail, like a cup, but in other stories, it's a platter with a severed head on it. Now, I'll talk about more of this in the grail episode, but the grail is like referred to as a cup, specifically the cup that Jesus drank from at the Last Supper. But in Arthurian legend, the grail could be a great number of things. It's never actually called a cup. One of those things it could have been is a platter. So let's say just for this story in the Studilian cycle that the grail is actually a platter, then for all other stories it's a cup. Because I just like the idea that the first time Percival ever saw the grail, it had a severed head on it. It's kind of fun. The grail shined and for sure emitted an aura that Percival couldn't put a finger on. The aura lit up the room more than all the candles combined. Again, Percival doesn't want to ask questions because he doesn't want to seem rude. He's an the round table, got to behave. So he decides he's just going to ask a servant in the morning what the fuck that procession was all about and just go to bed for now. Wakes up refreshed. He goes to find a servant to ask some questions about the procession and whatever else happened last night, but the castle is empty, like eerily empty, echoey hallways empty. So with no one left in the castle, Percival decides to leave and that he can continue his journey to search for his mother. And as he's leaving over the drawbridge, it starts to raise with him on it, forcing his horse to jump over and barely save itself and its owner. Percival thinks to himself, that was weird, but remembers he has a task at hand here to find his mother, so he heads up the road. Not far up the road, Percival meets up with a woman crying over a headless body of a knight. Nothing to do with the head on the platter. She tells him that the knight was just killed by another knight called the Haughty Knight of the Heath. The Haughty Knight was looking for the man that kissed his wife. So Percival doesn't really understand that it's him that he's after, but he just tries to comfort the maiden, the girl, and he tells her about his night at the castle, Corbenic. The woman recognized the sword, that it was a famous one. She knew that he was telling the truth. She warned him that the trebuchet sword was a great sword, but would break in a crucial fight. And the only way to fix it would be to find the trebuchet, the guy named Trebuchet, and that would have to be an adventure in its own. She asks how come Percival didn't save the Fisher King. Percival, being stunned by the question, isn't sure. She says that all he had to do. What do you mean? Why wouldn't you ask questions? If you would have just asked questions, you would have known all you needed, and you would have known to take the grail, and it would have healed the king, the Fisher King, and therefore healed the rest of the kingdom. How did you not know this? Anyone in the procession would have told you that. Then she asks Percival his name, to which he replies, Percival the Welshman. The maiden recognizes his name as her cousin, and she informed him of this. She tells him, like, you're my cousin. She tells Percival that some sad news, actually, that after you had left your house in the woods, your mother had died from grief, and you should probably just not even go bother checking up on her. And he believes her. He doesn't even, he just kind of quits the mission. Then he's sad. She's gone. Percival thanks her for her information and vows to help avenge her fallen knight by killing whoever did that to her. He internally says to himself that, like, at some point I got to go back and save the Fisher King now that I know this information. But right now, Mom's off the table, Grail's off the table. Let's deal with this haughty knight. So he rides up the road. He encounters the original maiden whom he'd kissed 7 times. This time she was in tattered clothing, barely covering her nakedness, and looking just generally bad. She warns Percival that the haughty knight abandoned her because he thought her a slut and was looking to get revenge on him for what he did to her. She also revealed that if anyone went to help her on the road, he would kill them too, and that's how the last knight lost his head, trying to help her. So Percival insists on helping the woman anyway. He was a gallant knight. It was his duty, and he felt guilty as if it was his fault that this was happening. So the haughty knight and the Percival face in single combat, and Percival wins handedly. And Percival gives Mr. Haughty the same deal he gave to the last guy he fought. Go to Camelot, tell Arthur you're his prisoner, and bring him a message for me. The message was to the Laughing Maiden again, saying that he was coming back to avenge her. Be ready. Before the haughty knight headed to Camelot, Percival also told him that his wife had done nothing wrong. The encounter in the tent was absolutely not her choice. He acted alone, without consent. She had done no wrong. The maiden and the haughty knight interact one more time before he heads off to Camelot. They reconcile, and the haughty knight apologizes for his jealousy. She doesn't seem to mind too much, I guess, and they get back together. Too bad you're about to hit the dungeon. The maiden decides to head back with her husband. Once they get back to Camelot, Arthur puts the knight in the dungeon and gives the maiden a job in the kitchen. She worked that job for many years until her lover, the haughty knight, was released. They moved out into the wilderness together after that, never to be seen again. Percival head back to Camelot as well, after running into Sir Sagramore, Sir Kay, and Sir Gawain. The knights ride up to Percival as he's sitting there, thinking to himself how the blood of a goose in the snow reminded him of the blush of a fair maiden. I swear to God, that is not the lie. That is seriously something he is deep in thought for. How much blood looks like the rosy cheeks of a maiden? The knights had actually been looking for the Red Knight for a while because they keep hearing about all the crazy adventures he'd been on, and Arthur wanted to talk to Percival immediately about this. Sagramore approaches, and he tells Percival to come with him. Percival stuck his head with a thought about goose blood, doesn't really react. Sagramore gets pissed, tries to fight Percival for not listening. So Percival says, sure, let's joust. And Percival unhorses Sagramore easily. Sir Kay thought to himself, enough of this crap. I don't even like this kid to begin with. Decides he's going to take a chance at jousting the Red Knight. Percival unhorses Kay easily, causing him to break his arm and his shoulder, just like the jester said would happen to Kay when he got kicked by the idiot pseudo brother of King Arthur. Gawain, the third and last knight, here to retrieve our buddy Percival, tries a different tactic. Talking. And oh my goodness, it works. Fuckboy Gawain talks down a savage Percival, and all four of them walk back to King Arthur's court together. Some more injured than others. Once back at Camelot, there's a party for Percival's return. The great knight has returned. The party's quickly interrupted by an ugly woman who gets up in Percival's face about not asking the questions that would have saved the Fisher King, and by extension, the castle and kingdom surrounding it. She even went as far as to say the curse would now spread further, all the way to Camelot. Percival feels bad and decides that he has to head out again to help the Fisher King. But Percival was an idiot, doesn't remember where he saw the castle. He spends 5 years looking for it. There's a 5-year time jump looking for that. And during his adventure, he looks for the Fisher King. During his adventures looking for the Fisher King, Percival meets up with a hermit. The hermit ends up being his uncle, his mother's brother, and he also finds out both him, like the hermit, and his mother were siblings to the Fisher King. The hermit says that by not asking the questions about the Grail and the spear, he had sinned. And to find the castle, he needed to repent. And Percival repents and heads out to find the Grail again. He gathers Sir Bors and Sir Galahad and heads out again. They make it, and I'll tell you more during the Holy Grail episode. On the trip to find the Fisher King once more, the knights are attacked by 20 rogue knights. They defeat them, but Percival's horse is killed. And his sword is smashed. I think this is where his sword is smashed. I might be wrong, but I'm going to say it is, because it's 2 Dillion cycle. Afterwards, Galahad leaves the party to head for the Grail himself. Percival insists Bor go off on his own too, because Percival knows this quest for him and him alone. So he goes back and finds Trebuchet to fix his sword, so we can have it again for another day. Percival is on foot at this point, and he's still out looking. But guess what? This takes so long to walk. Good thing I meet up with someone who gifts me a horse, a black horse. I love that. It's just so awesome that these guys get whatever they need to succeed all the time. This horse, though, is possessed. And the only reason that Percival even realized it was possessed is that it ran a 4-day journey in just 4 hours. But the speed of this horse made it dangerous. It was about to run off into a raging river, like with Percival on it, but it was about to run Percival into a raging river when Percival did not cross. Oh, shoot. Percival was riding it one time and almost ran into a raging river. But Percival did that like cross thing on his chest that Catholics do, and it breaks the demonic possession just in the nick of time. It does throw Percival off of it, and it does burst into flames and flies into the river for it by itself to die. But Percival is okay. He's horseless again, though. Continues along the path. On the path, he encounters a lion fighting a serpent. Percival decides he can only help one side of this, and he helps the lion because he says it's a more noble beast, and he slays the serpent. The lion, I guess, just walks off at this point. That night, Percival has a dream about the woman who owns the lion, and she thanks him for saving it. The lady who owned the serpent also comes to him in his dreams, but she is pissed. She demands payment for the death of her serpent. My payment isn't in coins. It is in you. I want you to be my man. She wanted him to marry him. He refuses, does that little cross thing on his chest, and they all leave. Percival reaches the church and tells the priest about his dream. The priest says that the dream was a test and that he had passed. Percival's journey leads him to a river's edge where a black ship sailed up and anchored beside him. Percival goes to take a look and sees a woman naked trying to persuade Percy to go in and fuck the shit out of her. Percy does that cross thing again. He knows that this is just temptation. This must be another test. The naked lady and her ship vanish, and Percival heads down the road further until he gets to another church. He tells the holy man about his temptation, and Percival is praised by the holy man for resisting the temptation. The holy man told Percy that the woman was the devil himself, and that if he had laid with her, it would have been the end of him. Probably ended poorly. Who knows how bad it would have been? Wouldn't have been good. The next day, a white ship stops and anchors beside our friend Percival. Percival gets into the ship, and he brings it right to the Grail Castle. We'll talk about more of that in the Grail. I'm trying to decide here if I should tell you more, but I'll just leave it there. I will tell you that Percival does achieve the Grail with Galahad and Bors. But after seeing the Grail, Percival is swept into a blanket of light, never to be seen again. Some tales say that he ended up a holy man of his own and died of natural causes years later. But we're in the Studilian cycle. So he's enveloped by light, probably scooped up to heaven by Jesus himself, and he's never seen again. Blanche Fleur and her child are left by themselves, but proud of their noble husband/father. And that's the end. That's Percival's episode. We'll get a little bit more into him a little bit later in the Grail episode. I do want to thank everyone for listening. It was fun to do these. I enjoy learning about the Knights of the Round Table, and I enjoy telling them to you guys. I'm sorry I've been doing so much, but the show is so close to being done that I feel like I owed you guys a little bit more. But I think it's over now. I think this will be the next one will probably be the Quest for the Holy Grail, if not just Galahad. We'll see how I feel. I think Quest for the Holy Grail in 2 weeks. So thanks for listening. I appreciate you. Go leave reviews. It'll be fun. Interact with me. Private Dicks Detective Agency at gmail.com. All one word, no caps.
I just watched Private Dicks and I think RJ's the funniest.
What? Come on.